I'm James.
And each episode we bring a different poet to the table, bring a different poem each that we'll discuss and analyze and kind of dig into. This episode we got my man William Wordsworth. We're getting romantic.
William Wordsworth, one of the premier English romantics.
Mm,
Um, you want to get back to nature. You want to get back to what makes you tick when you were a child,
mm,
running barefoot through the grass in the wild world.
right, right.
This is a guy you
Yeah.
might want to pick up.
No, that's hey. I mean, we've this is our third romantic. We did Keats, we did Blake, but William Wordsworth really is, the when you think of English romanticism, he is the guy. And yeah, if you want to return, like Rousseau, you think that childhood is a perfect place. You want to get back to nature. You want to get off your phone and stop scrolling through TikTok. Maybe read some William Blake. The world is too much with us.
Go and take a walk, a stroll. Nature has things
Yeah,
to
right.
teach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe people, maybe we could be in the mood for a bit of a neo romantic revival. Who knows?
I think so. I mean, hey, it's kind of a response to industrialization in England, in Europe. Um, it could be a response to the digitization of our world today. Um, in technology to want to, get back out into the world and, um, I guess kind of reclaim something we feel we've lost or has been taken from us.
A return to nature as a return to ourselves.
Yeah, or a return to innocence.
Mm. The whole when you compare and contrast our changing world to the changing world of the industrial revolution, I often wonder, you know, is our return would our return be to something like books itself, the written word? What exactly would we be returning to? Because of course it's easy to romanticize, the countryside when everyone has to move to the
Hmm.
city and work in a
Hmm. Hmm.
factory.
Right, right.
So when everyone's stuck glued to a screen staring at a
Hmm.
phone,
Hmm.
do we romanticize what? Just brisk walks after dinner? Something that simple? Or would it be have to be
Perhaps.
something a little more, I don't know, abstract?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it might be something as concrete as getting outside and walking. Talking about walking, that's something that William Wordsworth did, sort of famously in the Lake District. Him and Samuel Taylor Coleridge actually had the authorities called on them because they thought they might be I think they thought they might have been French spies because they were walking the country so much.
Mm.
It was unusual. You could probably have the same thing happen to you today. It'd probably be the local police. I don't know if you'd have the FBI roll up on you because you're walking so much, maybe. But because they were keeping odd hours,
Right.
which is actually goes back to Frost. Frost is a bit of a romantic in some regards,
Mm.
and I think in that Frost episode we did, episode one, for all those first Takians. I did the poem Good Hours, which kind of speaks to that. So that's something that William Wordsworth did not keep was good hours. And
Mm.
so maybe, in some ways romanticism is kind of a rebellion. And maybe,
Well,
that's somewhere where we could sort of focus our rebellious natures towards maybe, getting away from tech. Obviously, we're doing this on a podcast through the
mm.
internet with video,
Right,
but
right.
hey, William Wordsworth talked about getting away from books and he wrote them.
Oh
So,
yeah.
you know,
How doom hold heat yet preach nonviolence?
mhm, mhm. About to start speech. Come on, silence.
We're not gonna
Yeah,
go too far to that, but there is a
yeah.
duality to artistry, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I mean, hey, actually, William Wordsworth, I was gonna say this, later with my poem, but we're kind of touching on it now. He reminds me very much of a rapper that says, "I'm not a rapper." There's that whole
Mm,
movement of rappers that weren't rappers.
right, right,
Anytime they get in an interview or something, they say, "Oh, I'm not a rapper though. I'm not one of these rappers."
right, right.
He's someone who's like, "Look, I'm not one of these poets. I'm not a book guy,
Mm,
I'm not reading all the time, I'm getting out in the world. I'm experiencing, nature."
mm.
Um, so it's kind of yeah, it's kind of funny in that regard how things,
How things shift and
come back.
change,
Yeah, yeah.
yet stay the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. It's kind of easy to see that like in a rapper and you say like, oh, that's sort of like maybe an immature quality or something. And then you're like, well, what I mean, hey, William Wordsworth had the same attitude. What do you say about that?
Mm,
You think that, for some people they might hold one in higher regard than the other.
right,
And yet they display the same qualities in some
well,
some regards.
right, right. Well, what they say, like you spend like the first half of your artistry chasing your influences, and then the second half running away from them.
Mm,
So in
mm,
some ways, there's always a push and pull when it comes to artists or poets, or
mm.
you know you
Yeah, yeah.
you at some point you may desire to be listed with the greats, but then at some point you may want to be on your own. So
That's fair.
so
Yeah, that's
and I
fair.
and I've known great artists to express both sentiments. So
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, or even if not the greats, then maybe just like, I don't know, in today's day and age, you'd be like, oh, I want to be one of those poets that's published in, poetry or, in the Paris Review or something. And then you get to the point and you're like, look, I'm not one of these guys that's in,
mm-hmm.
the American Poetry Review or something like that, like
Right,
I'm of the people,
right.
Yeah, that is an interesting take on it. And something that's funny is that, William Wordsworth too, he later in life was, he's kind of someone who lived long enough to be a villain. Because
Mm,
the younger, and like later romantics sort of saw him as kind of a sellout. Um,
mm,
because he took a governmental job, he was big in religion, and then he was seen as someone who sort of abandoned his, previous ideals. And so people are like, hey, where, uh, I thought you believed in all these things. I thought you were, there were people who grew up like looking up to him, and then, kind of, I guess sort of, he kind of grew to disappoint in some regards,
mm,
kind of like, how I guess became old and conservative or something,
okay, okay.
which is, which is interesting during his time when he was, the poet laureate and was kind of seen as being kind of a maybe an old curmudgeon and a bit of a, had a negative opinion of, you know, it was sort of harsh to younger poets.
Okay. Hey, I didn't really know that.
Yeah, it's kind of a yeah, kind of an interesting sort of aspect to him. So all the stuff that we really read is like his younger days when he's like
Mm,
young and idealistic and like this is the William Wordsworth that we, you know and
mm,
think of, He didn't end up finishing out his life being that same guy that was, walking at all hours in
right.
the countryside.
Okay. So I guess he ended up being much more of the institutions.
Hmm. Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I could see how he was such a force,
Mm-hmm.
at the time because he really had like sort of almost like a set belief and set outlook on the world, which I think sometimes when you have really firm beliefs or views on the world or something, you almost always are proven sort of wrong or end up becoming hypocritical in some regard, when you have a strict philosophy. Um,
Mm.
just because it's sort of hard to maintain such things over a lifetime.
Right. Your point of view will eventually be, poke. They'll poke holes in it some way, one way or the other.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. But hey, I mean, you wanna get into the poems here?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I think I went first last time, but
Yeah, yeah. I can.
or did you go first last time?
I don't think it. I don't mind. I'll go first.
All right. Well, we'll do the tables.
I'm ready.
Oh,
Yeah. So the tables turned. Um, this is this was kind of written in. This came out with Lyrical Ballads, which was published in 1798 with Samuel Taylor Coleridge. This was like the book that like put Romanticism on the map. And this poem is the second half, not second half, but um, it's kind of in a set, which the other one is a very famous one called Expostulation and Reply. Um, and these were, written. Another little side note, like this might have been written in response to this guy named William Hazlitt, who was kind of a writer and philosopher at the time, who was like very much stuck on his moral philosophy. But
yeah.
anyways, the tables turned. Up, up, my friend, and quit your books, or surely you'll grow double. Up, my friend, and clear your looks. Why all this toil and trouble? The sun above the mountain's head, a freshening lustre mellow through all the long green fields has spread, his first sweet evening yellow. Books, 'tis a dull and endless strife. Come, hear the woodland linnet, how sweet his music. On my life, there's more of wisdom in it. And hark, how blithe the throstle sings. He, too, is no mean preacher. Come forth into the light of things. Let nature be your teacher. She has a world of ready wealth, our minds and hearts to bless, spontaneous wisdom breathed by health, truth breathed by cheerfulness. One impulse from a vernal wood may teach you more of man, of moral evil and of good, than all the sages can. Sweet is the lore which nature brings, our meddling intellect misshapes the beauteous forms of things we murder to dissect. Enough of science and of art. Close up those barren leaves. Come forth and bring with you a heart that watches and receives.
Hmm.
So that is the tables turned. Um,
It's almost a
a
siren
ballad poem.
song of romanticism.
Hmm. Hmm. That's why I chose it, is because this to me almost sort of sums up his romantic view.
Almost like a after school special, a call to action, we might call it
Yeah,
nowadays.
yeah, yep, certainly.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it's odd because in our day, we may not really see poetry as being divorced from books.
Hmm.
The
Yep,
idea
yeah,
that
yeah.
poetry is somehow not in the book, not in the realm of
Mm,
books,
mhm,
or
mhm,
somehow
mhm.
almost not in the realm of writing or the written word is kind of a strange idea to our modern sensibilities, I'd say. You know, um,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's a
It.
beautiful idea. It lets us know
Mhm,
that
mhm.
the poetry is not in the books. It's out in the world. It's in life. In the animals singing and the nature, and
Mhm.
it's almost like a music, a rhythm of life. And I guess you have to sort of be open to receive it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And going along with that, romanticism, especially in Germany, where you sort of where romanticism sort of springs from. It's also closely tied to the visual arts and painting,
Mm.
and and that sort of thought of poetry not being in books but out in the world. is kind of, almost putting poetry as an art up there with, sort of those like visual arts where like, hey, the real painting is out in the world, that's like what we're doing with, even impressionism. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so another thing, it kind of touches on what we talked about last week with Theodore Roethke, uh, that with rhythm, which William Wordsworth is very much, tied. This is a lyrical ballad, like this is a very regular, uh, has a very regular rhythm. Giving poetry that rhythm and putting it in, just giving it rhythm is what puts it kind of in like time and space and sort of almost makes it real in a sense. Kind of going along with, your points. Um, so I think that's something that is interesting that we're kind of seeing here
Mm, okay. Okay.
as far as like kind of making the poem real.
Mm. And it is in, I don't want to, kind of beleaguer the point, but there is something like about rhythm and, rhythm, meter, even rhyme. These sort of things almost seem like things of the page, but
Mm,
the poem characterizes it almost like things of life, things of, being alive, almost maybe like motion or movement or
mm-hmm,
something,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm,
music.
mm-hmm,
And it's a, I don't know, there's a certain dichotomy there. Not only is the poem, is there a dichotomy between, we have a dichotomy between this world of books with its sort of dullness and in almost like
mm-hmm.
it never
Abstraction.
abstraction, almost like it never ends. We have the
Mm-hmm,
world of
mm-hmm,
books and endless strife, as the poet puts it.
mm-hmm,
We have that
mm-hmm,
contrasted with the world of poetry, of movement, of sort of
mm-hmm.
live, of being alive almost. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it's we have an interesting dichotomy here that might speak to the moment in time that we're dealing with, where the poet, where poetry could really, jump off the page in a time where it may have been, much more read aloud, spoken, maybe shared
Mm-hmm,
with
mm-hmm,
friends or
mm-hmm.
something
Right.
like that. If you, harken back to our William Blake episode, where
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
his poetry was very much sung and spoken aloud, shared with friends.
Yep.
Something much more, not something that is sort of stale, gathering dust, but something that sort
Mm-hmm,
of has a
mm-hmm.
life. Notice we have
Yeah.
nature. We have nature with a capital N here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
also the dichotomy is is strange because Wordsworth also casts science and art as almost like with the books, like even art is
Yes.
something that is like
Mm-hmm,
in a book,
mm-hmm. Capital A art.
capital A art, which we would think, well, poetry is art and poetry is in books,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but maybe books only have words and poetry is in the world.
Yeah. Well, and like science and art being, sort of methods, techniques,
Mm,
ways of doing things, traditions, you know, that's kind of where I see that. But uh, again, that's sort of, maybe a bit of a, a little bit of a hypocrisy, about William Wordsworth. I think going, if you go back, even going up to the first stanza, he's telling his friend to quit his books, or surely you'll grow double. Clear your looks, why all this toil and trouble? That double, double, double,
mm,
boil, bubble, bubble, boil, and how does the line go? Uh,
double, double,
toil and
toil and
trouble.
trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
Pro-
Cauldron, no.
no, fire burn and
And
cauldron bubble,
Cauldron
I think.
Bumble. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, thank you. From Macbeth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so like those are famous lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like in that first stanza, he's telling him to put down his books while also making a literary allusion. You know,
Mm.
like what because personally, I don't think there's any mistake there. William Wordsworth obviously would have been well acquainted with Shakespeare and was, did read
Mm-hmm.
Shakespeare as a child. And so, um, him just kind of throwing those in there, those sort of literary allusions while telling his friend to put down his books. Um, and maybe in a way that's like because Shakespeare would have been so well known at the time, I'm imagining,
Mm-hmm.
even for his friend who is reading. That'd be like us knowing like Star Wars or something like that, or ET, it'd be like me telling you to stop watching TV and use a Star Wars line to get you to get outside, do or do not, there is no try, it'd almost be like, hey, we've seen enough. We've read enough
Mm.
of books, we've read Shakespeare. You don't need, how much more of this do you need to read? Kind of to your point earlier of it almost making it seem like it's endless, this sort of no end to the books you could read.
Right. When at one point in human history, books definitely had an end, and it was nature in the wild world that
Mhm.
was endless.
Because yeah, and if you think, and so going to the second stanza, the sun above the mountains had a freshening luster mellow through all the long green fields has spread his first sweet evening yellow. I'm thinking he's like, this is the golden hour. You know? You know how like you
Mm.
get to that golden hour where the sun starts to drop
Mm-hmm.
and it's like beautiful outside for like 30 minutes sometimes, in the summer especially. I feel like he's like telling his friend like, "Hey, get out. Like you're gonna miss this, you know? You're gonna miss this. We're already towards the end of the day.
Right.
Maybe even in life. Who knows? I don't know.
Mm.
Maybe he's like, it's almost like white noise or something like that, just the knowledge of death makes those and the pollution kind of makes those sunsets a little bit more special.
Mm.
He's
Right.
saying like, hey, get out, you know,
The sunlight's a finite resource.
yeah. And we're towards the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because these books, they're dull and endless strife. Listening to the music of the bird, the woodland linnet. That's one we unfortunately don't get to see here in North America. There's more of wisdom in it. It's an interesting thing to especially at the time, to think that there's wisdom in birds. Even today, that seems, maybe, that might be new age spiritual, but there are still people who think that, it's kind of an
Mm-hmm.
old belief too that, animals are more or less machines, or, have nothing to teach us. We're the top of the food chain.
Right.
Um, yeah, they don't know anything that we don't. And we know quite a bit more than they do. I mean, a bird can drive a car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's almost like as
Uh,
humans, we can exalt our ignorance and our knowledge.
mm. What I like too is in this oftentimes too, he
What?
has like a lot of uh trochees
Mm.
that he starts lines with. That's something that Shakespeare does a lot as well, and Robert Frost would do too, where he starts with the emphasis. Books, 'tis a
Mm.
dull and endless strife, even that up, my friend.
Right. And
He does,
hark.
yeah. He too is no mean preacher. Come forth, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, coming forth into the light of things. Let nature be your teacher. Is that, when we're constantly striving, even for us, we're probably overworked. We work too much. get out of the job, get out into the sunlight, come into the light of things. Let nature be your teacher. Truth breathed by cheerfulness. I love that one impulse from a vernal wood may teach you more of man, of moral evil and of good than all the sages can, you
Mm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
It, which is an interesting thing. Like you want to spend all your time, I've done it myself, reading and trying to learn from the sages when they learned from living life. You're living the same life that they were, or could be, and yet you're spending your time learning from them when they learn from life. Get out and learn from life.
Yeah, that's pretty much the point of Siddhartha, one of my
Mm,
favorite novels. You know, um,
yeah, one I haven't read.
hey, it's an excellent one, but you kind of got the gist of it kind of there. So
Yeah, bro. Yeah, I don't need to read
yeah, hey,
it. Yeah,
you
yeah,
probably wouldn't get it. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
But no, but
Yeah.
yeah, but like but the thing is, in Siddhartha, you have two figures, and it both there's wisdom in both paths, and the Buddha
Mm,
even says it.
mm,
One person, Govinda, he's an eternal learner. He's always sitting, he's always learning, and the Buddha tells him like, there's great wisdom in that. And then Siddhartha, he's always a doer. He's always trying to
mm,
do this, do that,
mm,
leave his father, leave this. And the Buddha tells him, there's also wisdom in that.
mm,
And and spoiler alert, at the end of the book, Govinda meets Siddhartha and he's sitting at Siddhartha's feet and he's like learning from him. And then Siddhartha kisses Govinda on the forehead and they
mm,
both trip out. And
mm.
this basically like, however you get there, you're pretty much going to get there.
Yeah. Huh. Huh.
Whether you want to sit and read all day or whether you want sit and learn all day or whether you want to go out and do it, that's sort of that's the sort of Buddhist sort of philosophy on it. Obviously Wordsworth would say no, be like Siddhartha, go out and experience life.
Right. Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
you know
I think that's where he's at.
for
Certainly.
sure.
Right.
But
Because
there are
you.
some out
Yeah.
there that are like Govinda. They read,
Hmm. hmm
they
hmm
sit and learn all the time. So
Yeah. Which I think the last two stanzas speak to, and also are like, he finishes on great points with this. Our meddling intellect misshapes the beauteous forms of things we murder to dissect, you know, instead of us
mm,
just taking things as they are. For us, we gotta kill them and tear them apart. We can't just, you know,
right.
um, we can't, he's sort of, he's definitely downing the intellect, the intellectual pursuit of trying to learn things and taking them apart instead of taking them maybe, at face value for what they are.
Mm,
And that enough of science and of art close up those barren leaves because one, leaves being, kind of referring to them as, books, letters, these, leaves like sheets of
mm,
paper. But also I think of it as, close up those barren leaves. They aren't fruit. These are leaves
right.
that have fallen on the ground. They're dead.
And I almost see like the heart that watches and receives is almost like fruit contrasted with that come forth. Like,
Hmm.
like how fruit sort of comes forth
Yeah, yeah.
and bring with you a heart that watches and receives. And I know it's almost like you have to be sort of open. And
Hmm.
it's,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
for Wordsworth to sort of castigate the entirety of science and art, put to kind of where most people see those opposed, like those things are sort of opposed. People are all about
Yeah.
science or I'm all about art,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
you know,
Right.
Wordsworth sees the science and the artists as people who just study, 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 study,
Hmm.
and never
Hmm.
get
Hmm.
anything done. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I'm also thinking of like, doing things as, two particular methods and, sort of actively, where he's saying something that watches and receives. That's almost as opposed to his friend's active studying,
Hmm.
actively trying and trying. It's
Something
like
that
stop trying and
searches.
just, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, something that searches and stresses or anticipates or seeks.
yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, you have any final things you wanna say about this one?
I mean, this is basically the siren call of romanticism. You know, uh, with this one, I'm gonna say Wordsworth is the Pied Piper of romanticism.
Mm,
It's almost like, "Come, my children, drop your stuffy books, your stuffy texts, your iPhones, your TikToks, whatever, and
mhm,
just
mhm,
let's go
mhm.
out in the woods, let's frolic through the
Right,
flowers, let's
right.
sort of a regaining of innocence."
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. Yep, and I'll finish this by the same way I started, This to me, I feel like this poem is if I had to tell you, if I had to just give someone like, hey, what is William Wordsworth stand for, believe? I think this poem kind of sums it up. Yep.
The sun, the
What do you think?
moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think so too.
Monster Island's ours. You know who you are. Is that where you're gonna
I
go with that?
was just gonna say the sun, the moon, the stars are all in your hands.
I got the whole world in my hands.
You just got to be prepared to pick it up.
Mm,
Now, the poem that I'm gonna do, and I should have said this earlier. I've actually liked William Wordsworth since I was a child, and his poetry
mm,
is much anthologized. It has been very much
yep.
anthologized throughout time.
Mhm.
So I decided to do one that I remembered, like, even inspired me to write poetry even back when I was in like third grade. Like, a very young guy. I used to write poetry when I was a kid, and this is the poetry I remember this being in my elementary school English uh, textbook for sure. And so this is a very much anthologized poem by William Wordsworth, and I'm going to be reading it and analyzing for you guys. And it is "I wandered lonely as a cloud." So gonna knock this out. And this is it's a great poem, and we talk about innocence and these sort of romantic ideals, and this is definitely a poem I read as a kid. So "I wandered lonely as a cloud" by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth to show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. So, "I wandered lonely as a cloud" by William Wordsworth. First
Yep.
impressions, Justin?
Yeah, yeah. Well, unfortunately, they aren't my first impressions because, as you said, he's widely anthologized. I've known this poem for years. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if if not everyone in our audience has at least heard this poem or, um, just knows the line. But
Right.
you know, something I kind of that I like about it that I haven't exactly thought of before, but just thinking about him wandering lonely as a cloud, think of him just sort of drifting in, aloof, unattached, uh, you know, yeah, just sort of just the aloofness that I'm picturing now that I haven't thought of before.
It's such a
What? Yeah.
modern simile, you know.
Mm,
It
mm,
seems like it could be in a pop song that came out in the
mm,
80s or the
mm-hmm,
90s or something, you
mm-hmm,
know.
mm-hmm. And maybe the Smiths might sing something like that. I don't know. I was listening to them today. They have some good ones.
And while we're here, what makes a cloud lonely, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
What do you think, Justin? What makes a
Well,
cloud
I don't know
lonely?
what makes a cloud lonely, but I have seen those lonely clouds that sort of have somehow
Mhm.
broken off from
Mhm.
all the rest of the clouds. You just see one. They're usually not very big, but a little
Right.
cloud just,
By
going
itself, just
right. Yeah.
on its
Just,
own. Right.
yeah. Yeah. Like it's, yeah, wandered off.
Like it's
Yeah.
there does seem
Yeah.
something sad or
Mm-hmm.
detached about that.
Yeah, I think it can be kind of sad. I think it can also be maybe it can be a little joyful. Maybe it can be a little whimsical, like, hey, look at that cloud just broke off on its own. Where
Well,
you
like
going, little cloud?
I think we do have the potential for whimsy there, but I think you know we kind of what contrasts is our what contrasts our sort of high-minded aloofness of being this lonely cloud is this tangible field of golden daffodils, you know?
Hmm. I think to say, I think there is maybe a bit of, I don't know if it's quite sadness, but I don't think it's necessarily in the positive direction as far as moods go because,
Melancholy.
yeah.
I think that's the
Hmm.
word you're
Hmm.
looking for.
Maybe perhaps,
Melancholy.
yeah. Yeah, because the golden daffodils made him happy, and when he sits in pensive moods, he thinks of those again, and they make him happy again. So I
Mm.
think there's a reason why, he's wandering lonely, sees these daffodils, and they sort of fill him with joy.
And it's interesting. We have the contrast of the cloud being on high. I almost
Hmm.
imagine that is, if we harken back to your poem, those are the scientist and the artist high in this high-minded aloof state, when the real poetry is down on the
Hmm.
ground with the
Perhaps, yeah.
daffodils, where
That could be.
easy to float
Then maybe that's why
over,
he was alone.
maybe.
He's
But
just a mind.
you know but the beauty, the beauty is down in the earth for Wordsworth. The
Right.
beauty
Yeah.
is
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
down into the nitty gritty of things.
Right.
It's not in any of this
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
high-mindedness,
And it's also he saw a crowd, a
a
host of
host,
golden daffodils.
a
He
crowd,
got down into the masses.
exactly, beside the
Yeah.
lake, beneath the trees, like
Mhm. Yep.
some they
Fluttering and
were
dancing in the breeze.
not only fluttering, not only like shimmering, but also sort of dancing.
Well, and William Wordsworth is also someone who was, he's an Anglican. He was had a role, I believe, in the church later on in life. Um, But this is almost a little bit the end of that first stanza is a little bit contrasted, with like the chaff that blows with the wind. He goes down
Mm,
with those beneath the trees fluttering and dancing in the breeze and almost makes that seem like it's a good thing. These
mm,
things you know that sway this way and that way with the wind. He got down there with those golden daffodils, and that's
right. That's almost like,
yeah, could be the small problems of the world or of the day, of the
mm,
people.
but as I mean, as we move into the second stanza, they are sort of contrasted with stars, but maybe not, as like how continuous they are, how many there are.
mm,
They stretched along the bay. In just a glance, he was able to, see, 10,000.
mhm,
Um,
mhm, mhm,
and they were,
mm,
and they were dancing, and they were sparkling, and they gave something. They they sparked something sort of poetic in his sort of poetic sense of himself.
mm,
A
mm,
poet could not but be gay in
mhm,
such a
mhm,
joking company.
mhm,
So
mhm,
so often, in like when he would be in a pensive mood, the daffodils would flash on that inward eye. But
mhm,
also
mhm.
there was something about them that sort of, we get something where, like, again, the daffodils, the nature, that's the real poetry. The real poetry is in nature all around us.
Yeah, yeah. Something that's kind of struck me because
Mm,
of, the way we're kind of approaching this, going back to that second stanza, the first two lines, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. Almost makes me wonder if he's talking about, like, those that came before us, or the greats, or maybe even the patriarchs, of the
mm,
Bible, continuous as the stars above that shine, just as infinite as these, of the the stars in the sky that are, somewhat permanent. These things, they twinkle. They're just as
mm,
continuous, just as, sort of, they're just as eternal, as these eternal spirits up in the sky. Um, maybe he's talking about the people.
mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and even going back to, and then going back down, jumping down to the third stanza, those first lines, the waves that beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. That almost makes me think of, the waves that dance, because that's almost like the rhythms of life. That's almost the natural rhythms of things. That, those are the waves, you know, but, these golden daffodils, they even outdid the waves of, the ocean, the rhythms of the world, with their
Mm,
dancing.
mm. Yeah, that's interesting. There is it's some The daffodils are almost like a treasure trove, something, valuable that is sort of
Hmm.
kept
Hmm.
with the poet.
Yeah, yeah.
Um and it's interesting, this poem is, the way the poet wanders. The poem is a very mobile poem. As we talked about before, the cloud sort of represents sort of the potential to be so high minded and thing, and like the scientist and the artist from your poem, and but how, like, the same way that William Blake calls them out of the institutions into nature, similar
Hmm.
to how the daffodils sort of called to the poet.
Hmm.
This last stanza, we get a small reiteration of that same movement. Whenever he lies down, yet he has this vacant or pensive mood, his on his inward eye, he can still sort of be with those daffodils and appreciate the bliss of that moment. um
Hmm.
so the last stanza serves as a recapitulation of the poem itself. Whenever
Hmm. Yeah.
he himself is, lying down, or and letting his mind wander, those daffodils sort of ground that. Even when his mind is wandering, It is grounded by those daffodils, just as he was once grounded by them as he wandered
Mm-hmm.
lonely as a cloud.
Yeah. Yep. And
So,
another, yeah. Sorry,
no,
go ahead.
no, no, no. I was done.
Well, I was gonna say another instance here too, where I think, kind of going back to where you're saying him kind of calling out um, the scientists and the artists, um, in my poem. I think that that line in the is it the third stanza,
Mm,
the last two lines, I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. He's like,
mm,
look, I went out there, I looked, I found this, I came upon this, just like you was
right,
saying, come out with a heart that watches and receives. I
right.
gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. He wasn't looking for it. He didn't go out there, okay, let me see what I
Mm,
can find here. Let me find something that I can take with me. And,
right.
he did, and that's sort of what the scientist and the artist is doing through their studies, or
Searching.
yes, yeah, trying to find, let me find that piece of inspiration.
Right.
And I'll pluck this piece of inspiration. I'll use that here. No, he just went out and he just took it in. He
He
just received it.
received it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. Because then he says, "For oft when on my couch I lie, now here is the wealth that it brought me. Here's the reward. The reward is
Mm,
that now often when I sit on my couch and lie in sort of a pensive mood, you know, and who else hasn't experienced that flash of the inward eye? I picture all kinds of places from my childhood or places I've been. Sometimes I realize I just go back to them, and this is one of those things that now he gets to go back to. There's like, my old street. I can picture, how my backyard looked from, the bathroom window that was that was all the way on the back of the house. Um, these things can just come to you in these when you're
mm.
just sitting there thinking, and for him it's this host of golden daffodils he happened upon.
So right. So the poem sort of lands there, and like I said, we kind of the poem like the in the end, the wealth that it brought, it mimics the poem itself. So then we
Hmm.
have so then in the end we have this this movement from lonely wandering to the bliss of solitude. Both are
That's good.
states of being by yourself. He's
Yes.
by himself
Yeah.
in both
Hmm.
instance,
Hmm.
but we go
Hmm.
from loneless wandering to the
Hmm.
bliss of solitude. So it's almost
Hmm.
like we go from lonely wandering to almost finding himself. We almost go from,
Yes.
searching desire to the peace of enlightenment, almost like
Mm, mm,
I mean, it's this is a very mobile poem. I mean, even
yes.
everything from the title to the movements the poem
Hmm.
itself
Hmm.
makes,
Hmm.
and it's a fractal. It spins out fractically
Yeah.
at the
Mm,
and
hmm.
even
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
we experience this poem as those daffodils, as we might
Yes.
be flipping through our our old
Hmm.
English book,
Hmm.
even as a
Hmm.
child, or
Hmm.
whatever, we stop and come across this poem, and
Right.
all my life I have thought of this poem.
Hmm. Hmm.
All
Yeah.
my life in different situations. And
Hmm.
even the
Hmm.
everything from the word jocund to, giggling to myself, a poet could not but be gay. I've thought
Yeah.
of that line over the year, but be gay, and giggled to myself here and there. So
Yeah. That's
this poem sticks with you, and it just like the daffodil stuck with him, just like nature stuck with Wordsworth.
yep.
So
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
this this fractal we have a fractal situation on our hands here.
Uh-huh. It is interesting that, he did wander lonely and found something that gives him some sort of peace. Like he wandered, he didn't go out looking. He didn't go out looking on his own or anything. He wandered. He received something sort of passively that gives him, yeah, that gives him kind of this peace in the end. I think that's a good kind of point and call out. It's
what wealth the show to me had brought, which is the bliss of solitude. The wealth, the
Right.
wealth, the wealth that he had been brought
Yes.
is the bliss of solitude
hmm
because he's
Yes.
still just as lonely,
hmm hmm
but he goes from lonely wandering
hmm
to
hmm
being blissfully solitude in a
Yeah.
place,
Yeah.
even if the place is only in his mind.
hmm 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 Which is another, point to romanticism as a whole is the focus on the internal experience as
which
well
is
as going, into nature.
which is why we've been smacking at Buddhism this whole episode, and I did not know we would end up doing that. I really had no idea we would end up doing that, but it makes perfect sense. I mean,
Oh, and I think that, it makes a lot of sense as to why then, you go into poets like Mary Oliver, you know,
yeah.
um, later on. And which I'm going to a class here in 2 weeks, and we're going to talk about spring, and we're going to talk
Mm,
about vernal woods, perhaps. But
okay.
we're going to talk about William Wordsworth and Mary Oliver. And Mary Oliver is much more closer to getting into just explicitly Buddhist. And and Ada Lamont. We talked about Ada Lamont.
Right.
She gets into she explicitly gets into Buddhism.
I don't know. There's something, I mean, there's something about gardening,
hmm
Buddhism,
hmm
romanticism.
Haikus.
Yeah.
The Japanese, I know it's Japanese, but the Japanese Buddhists
I mean, if we're
and
gonna
like
want to go
that,
to, we already did the China. We already did an episode on
hmm
the
hmm
Chinese nature
right,
poets
right,
and
and
Ezra Pound.
that's what I was just about to say, Ezra Pound. So we kind of, there's it's concentric loops when it
Right.
comes to this stuff.
Yeah, we're looping back around for sure.
hmm hmm
But I
Yeah,
wandered lonely as a cloud, man. I mean, man, I'm 30. I'm turning 33 this year, and damn, I remember this poem as a literal kid, man. So, and I
hey,
remember
33, that's your crucifixion year, dude.
it's bound to happen.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
can't fight it.
hmm
But man, yeah. So I wandered lonely as a cloud. How many of us have just? It's just such a beautiful thing to say. You know?
I
There's
wandered
something just.
lonely as a cloud.
That's the type of
It's like
stuff
almost like
that'll
an old cowboy in a way.
right. Like, yeah, it's it echoes through time. I can see anyone saying
hmm
that from a cowboy to a a schoolgirl to you could there's you can see anybody saying that.
Even in different cultures, I think there's something about it that's you know uh,
There's something
touches
human about that.
universality.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I think that is the big thing with the romantics is almost like a return to humanism,
Mm,
and that's that is what we are. And that's kind of what we're talking about trying to do too with getting, away maybe from the digital age. It's sort of like a return to innocence, a return back to who or what we are or were, or what we lost. And, um, William Wordsworth was also heavily influenced by Milton, and, writes about him in some of his poems. He's one of his chief influences. And, Milton's Paradise Lost is about us lose the loss of innocence.
mm,
And perhaps England, as a country, romanticism could even be seen as a political movement, or sort of maybe not ideology, but you have a nation, an empire that is saying, hey, let's go back to the way things were when we were just a quiet, lonely little cloud of an island, off
mm,
the coast of Europe, instead of being this global dominant, hegemonic empire. And now we're putting ourselves through the meat grinder of industrialization to keep up.
mm. Especially after the French killed the king, it's like, ew.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which a lot of the romantics at first were very pro French Revolution and then against, because they saw what ugliness it brought.
Aristocracy, of course. But
Yeah. because he did spend some time in France pre French Revolution and during. And like Byron, he fought and died in Greece, I believe, or Spain. I don't know. He fought in Spain. Maybe he died in Greece. Same thing.
I wonder
Wanting
if
to fight
his time,
revolutions.
I want his time in France. I'm sure maybe that's why he, was a staunch institutionalist after
Perhaps.
after
Yeah.
returning to back to the Britain.
Yeah, kind of keep it more about kind of keeping order as he grows older.
Hey, I don't blame him. French Revolution, I can imagine, was chaotic to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just watched the Napoleon movie this past week. I don't know if you've seen that one with Joaquin
Joaquin,
Phoenix.
I haven't seen it.
hmm
People said
It
it wasn't
helps if
that
you've
good, but
yeah, it you if you have a fair understanding of Napoleon and the French Revolution, I think that you can pick up on it much better. If you go into it not knowing a lot, you're gonna be like, what the hell's going on? Like
okay.
stuff is just going like we're jumping years, within seconds.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
we're from one scene to the next, it's like 10 years, sometimes.
Great, man.
There's no, they don't outwardly tell you that. So then you're like, wait, what?
I might check it out
But
because I like Joaquin.
mhm. I wouldn't not recommend it, but I would just say, if you don't know anything about the French Revolution, I don't know, you might not like it. My wife thought it was, found it difficult to follow.
Okay. I'll keep
So,
that in mind. But yeah, William Wordsworth. I
but hey,
mean, he's damn, I don't even know what to say. He's a poet. He's a poet of our
he's
language.
a poet's poet, This is a poet's poet. Okay.
I
This
mean,
guy would have been,
this is damn near like Mother Goose stuff. You know what I
mm,
mean? Like,
mm,
don't get me wrong. A lot of his, I just mean Mother Goose and how foundational or
fundamental.
fundamental some of the stuff
Yeah,
is.
yeah, it's certainly fundamental English poet. Romanticism, I think, is like, I don't know, it's got to be like it is a foundational aspect of English poetry and literature.
William Blake,
I mean, so
Wordsworth,
yeah, John
Yeats.
Keats, yep, Shelley. Um, so
Yeah.
hey,
So hey, great. Let's check who we got
Coleridge.
next time.
Yeah, next time we have A.E. Housman,
Yeah, A. Houseman. Okay,
right?
that'll be tight. That'll be
Yeah,
tight. That'll be
perfect.
tight. No,
Yeah, so I got Shropshire Lad, right? Is that him next time?
William. No, we have Edwin Arlington Robinson.
Do we have A.E. Housman on the list?
No, I'm maybe I could have skipped A. Houseman. Was that between Edwin Arlington Robinson and
No, is he? I might have just gotten it confused.
we can do
Edwin
A.
Arlington
Houseman.
Robinson.
We can
No, it's
do.
fine. We got.
It doesn't matter. Then we can do A. Houseman, then Edwin Arlington Robinson. Then I got Mary Oliver, right? And
It sounds right.
okay, cool. Won't give too much away.
Yeah, yeah. We got a lot in the tuck, folks. Okay.
For sure. But
Yeah.
all right, man. Great episode, man. Hey,
Hey, there we go. William Wordsworth. So hey, like, subscribe, share it with your friends. Maybe show it to you. Maybe sit down with your grandmother one night, watch an episode, learn something, go out and read William Wordsworth. Hey,
hey, can't beat it.
whatever. It's first take. I've been Justin,
I'm James. We'll see you guys later.
signing off.
All right. Hey, that felt good.
Mm,
Yeah, man. I do think we might have to. I do think it is time to kind of invest in a little bit more
I think so too, because I think we're getting
because
pretty
we're
good, and I'm
we're
like,
starting
dude,
to
people